During the 2019 COVID pandemic, over 60% of Americans increased their use of alcohol, and every day, over 385 Americans die from excessive use of alcohol. What do you think of when I say the word addiction? Is it the stereotypical image of an addict who will do anything just to get a hit? We throw the addiction word around a lot. Maybe you've heard your friends say, yeah, I'm really addicted to my morning coffee. If without it, I wouldn't be able to carry on my day and act like a normal human being. Or is it your friend who's really craving fried chicken every weeknight just because it gives them some hit of dopamine that makes them feel good and satisfied enough to carry on the rest of their day? According to Wikipedia, addiction is a neuropsychological disorder characterized by a persistent and intense urge to use a drug or engage in a behavior that produces natural reward, despite substantial harm and other negative consequences. We all know the typical examples of what an addiction looks like. Anything that prevents us from feeling the pain of the present and basically helps us avoid our emotions in order to put them off in pursuit of something immediately gratifying. As someone who has experienced this cycle of toxicity within myself, I know firsthand how detrimental it can be to the relationship I have with myself as well as the relationship I have with others. And more often than not, I don't realize I have an addiction problem until it feels too out of my control, and that's all my brain is preoccupied with, because the pain of staying present and of dealing with myself and being brutally honest is in fact too unbearable. So today I want to give you some tips and advice on how I've overcome my addiction, knowing that it is a problem that can be cured, even though it is a disease, and hopefully it will help you conquer some of these yourself if you realize that you have some onset symptoms of addiction in your life. Addiction really is a symptom of a greater problem. When we look at people who usually suffer from addiction, they more often than not have other mental illness as well, from depression to complex PTSD as well as anxiety. And the overlapping of these issues will make it really hard to identify what is at the root of addiction and of mental illness. But there are a couple practical applications that anyone can employ starting today, right now, to turn their life around and begin making greater strides toward the future that they actually want to be in. First, we need to deal with one addiction at a time. If you're suffering from an eating disorder or a binge watching problem or a porn addiction, you need to tackle it one problem at a time. When you try to quit too many things, your brain gets really overwhelmed and overloaded with the sensory deprivation that it'll feel really hard to completely change your life around. So one addiction at a time allows us to acclimate our bodies and brains to new situations that will hopefully ease off and wing off the impulses that we have. Working on one addiction at a time means first cutting off people that are associated with your addiction. You need to recognize your triggers. What triggers you to reach for that problem, to reach for the food, to shop, to go on social media? Is it having a bad day? Is there a specific trigger or event that happens in a repetitive way that prompts your body to want to reach for that thing? What you need to understand is that according to neurobiology, emotions last from seconds to minutes. Biologically, they last about 90 seconds in our body. This means that when you're carrying an emotion with you, if you're having a bad day, if somebody pours coffee on you, if you get rejected, and you continue to feel bad throughout the day, then you're choosing subconsciously to hold on to that emotion and you're not willing to let go. This way, you force yourself to replay this emotion in your brain, and then you start living this narrative where you're a victim where you feel out of control of your life because you are indulging in how good the bad feeling can feel. That sounds ironic, because why would we choose to feel bad if we want to feel good? Well, our brains are funny little creatures. They like to be comfortable. And when you've been conditioned from a young age to not have the tools to see yourself in a clear way, to regulate your emotions, to form healthy relationships with others, as well as build healthy communication styles, then you inevitably feel comfortable in this position where you are belittled, you're sabotaging yourself, and you're indulging in unhealthy relationships with yourself, with other people, and with the world around you. We don't realize this because when we're growing up, nobody tells us what is right or wrong, and we're really only modeled from what we see immediately in our environment. So if your caretakers weren't themselves emotionally regulated, or they didn't have the tools to respond to you and acknowledge how you feel, then we're taught to push our emotions down and to avoid how we're feeling, making it even more painful to feel our feelings in the long term. This means that as adults, when we are going through the daily grind of life, it can be really, really hard to even face small distressing events, from a rejection to not getting a text back, to not getting enough likes, to dealing with bills, simple things that keep us going. And we become over dramatic and overreactive to what the situation is, causing our nervous system to be even more stressed out and not letting ourselves actually relax, because we simply weren't taught the tools to do that. So this is not your fault, but from today you can start taking responsibility and accountability for your emotions, knowing that this is half a conscious battle, half a subconscious willingness to let yourself change and relax and be okay with the unknown. So I'll share a little bit about my personal addiction issues and how I overcame them. Right before college started, I got into the greens, and then during college I partied, drank, had a nicotine problem, the typical American student life. Although not every American student who goes to college experiences this. That I know for sure. But because I was already very emotionally unregulated and felt a lot of despair in my own body, a lack of safety in my body, I didn't know how to deal with all of the emotions that came up in the face of change, which seems like chaos at the time. And as a result, I avoided how I felt and avoided putting in the work to feel safe in my body and to really accept myself by engaging in harmful substances. Luckily, I stopped myself in time and was able to overcome that, but it was a long journey that took a lot of ups and downs, and tears are shed. I screamed and I let my inner rage be unleashed, but ultimately I was able to build a deeper, more intimate relationship with my inner child and develop a healthier self-image and self-concept. This took a lot of brutal honesty. When we are avoidant, we don't like to be honest with ourselves because we don't want to take responsibility. It just feels good to believe that we're a victim of our circumstances and think that everything that happened to us was out of our control. When if you look back at your life and most of your decisions that has led you to this point, you can't say that you didn't partake in any of them. And that's a hard reality. It's not easy to face that. It's even harder to reflect and really think about why you made those decisions and where your state of mind was at those points. But when you do the shadow work of daily journaling, daily reflection, meditating, and moving your body, you're able to get those energies out and transform yourself day by day into someone that you actually want to be proud of. This takes discipline, lots of patience, and more importantly, compassion. On those days when it feels hardest to keep going and to not let your impulse drive you, it takes a lot of self-control and compassion. And even when you do fail and you do indulge, you can't beat yourself up and say, oh, okay, I took a drink today. I guess it's over for me now, right? Like, no more sobriety. No, you are the operant power of your life, and you do get to decide if you want to make a future that's worth it for yourself. Realize that where your attention goes, energy flows. If you're constantly thinking about your next hit, the next time you can get that dopamine, you are actually creating this pattern within yourself that is saying that you cannot be satisfied until you have this thing, whether that's porn or fried chicken or food. I say fried chicken because that was a problem for me. I actually spent a lot of money on like shopping and food in my early 20s, and it was a problem, like, financially. And I'm not proud to admit it, but I know that this truth helps me integrate those shadow sides of myself that I'd rather not face, and it just makes it easier in the future when I'm in a similar situation where I'm really stressed out and I'm not using these methods to cope, but instead turning to healthier ways to let out the stress. So, like I said in the beginning, addictions are habits and feedback cycles. When you start being aware of what your triggers are, that's when the magic and the change can start to reveal itself. Is it talking to a specific person that triggers you? Is it doing a specific activity or thinking about a specific event? The more you're aware of what is going on within yourself and how you relate to the world wherever you are, the easier it can become to see clearer where your impulses lie and why you do those things. And for a long time, I was really judgmental towards myself for indulging in these triggers. Like, why can't I just stop, right? Like, I want to stop, but it's like really hard. Like, why can't I stop? And in a bit, I'm going to talk about a hypnosis method that has really helped me. It's very similar to cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT. But hypnosis, I find, is one of the simplest, easiest ways to reconfigure your brain, and that helps you subconsciously change and shift your mindset around your triggers. So when you find it really hard to stop, instead of judging yourself, it's better to become curious about why you are seeking this out in the first place. In the moment of you desiring that trigger is the easiest way to figure out the reason why, and also the hardest thing to do, because it's once again about being honest. When I had a hard time falling asleep, I would turn to the Green Goddess and pushed away my fears of insomnia, of nightmares, of things that I just didn't want to deal with because it was too hard and it felt too chaotic. When you have a trigger and you don't realize it's a trigger, that can also lead to other triggers. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm gonna have the day off, right? Like self-care, Green Goddess, and then it's like eating unhealthy foods, and then it's like binge watching TV, right? And this cycle just like continues until you don't realize that you've like done it 4 days in a row, 3 weeks out of the month, and it just like keeps coming back because your body is so used to the comfort of this feeling. Even though this part of you that's like ambitious and goal-oriented and wants something greater for yourself can't seem to control this other aspect of you. But once you begin to do the work of self-acceptance and self-compassion, whether this means relying on people around you and asking for help, or spending time by yourself to meditate and practice self-compassion, journaling, and moving your body in a way that feels good for you, regardless of how you may be perceived, that's when you can finally relax. The goal of healing addiction is not sobriety, in my opinion. It's expression. You may have heard that the opposite of depression is not joy, but expression. And the more that we're able to express ourselves and create from the pain, from all of the complicated, chaotic emotions that we may feel, the more free and gentle we can feel, and recognize that it is possible for us to nurture within ourselves and treat ourselves with the same kind of respect and consideration that we would want to treat other people that we love. And it starts with you. So knowing that the scariest thing within you is not your shadow side, and not even the intense and deep feelings that you have, but your fear of facing these feelings can actually liberate and take the pressure off of ourselves. When you're starting your healing journey, or if you're already on it, you need to be realistic and not set impossible expectations for yourself. This means that if you make a mistake and indulge in a trigger or an addictive behavior, you can't shame yourself about it, because that's how you know it's an addiction, right? You feel guilty afterwards or around the time you indulge in it. Otherwise, you wouldn't think it's addiction or a problem that needs to be fixed. Even the worst addicts that we've seen in media know that it's a problem, and yet they also feel like they can't control it because they're blaming it on their brain and this disease that can't be cured. Well, guess what? Cancer has a cure, and that cure is play and choosing the right avenue for ourselves. I'm not going to talk about that. Recognize that change is a constant in life. There will always be change, and the only way to deal with that is to stay present and remember the power that we have within ourselves to approve and love ourselves regardless of what happens. This makes it easier to have perfect clarity of ourselves and our image. I don't think our minds actually ever stop running. And the faster that we accept that there will always be chaos and unpredictability, the easier it becomes to accept change and not judge ourselves for what we cannot control. So I mentioned a couple of healing methods that I hope will help you. There are a ton of resources out there, from learning about family dynamics to shadow work journaling to looking at divination. And this is where I'll plug my divination. I recently started delving into Chinese philosophy and the I Ching. And the I Ching is very similar to tarot reading or astrology. And if you like an I Ching reading and learn about what you can do to have some practical applications for overcoming a problem in your life, feel free to fill out the link in my bio and we'll see if we're a good fit. But now to the actual hypnosis section of this video, which has helped me a ton. So the point of hypnotizing yourself, which first of all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, is that you need to decondition yourself from your addiction. This means creating a greater negative conditioning when you think about your addiction so that it outweighs any pleasure you get. Right, the reason we want to reach for the cigarette, reach for the drink, is because we really like the feeling right before we have it. That anticipation is really exciting. It's kind of like foreplay. I made a video recently about how everything is sex, and yeah, it's kind of like foreplay. That teasing, right, with the substance, like, ooh, this is fun, I'm gonna get a hit, it's gonna feel so good, I know what to expect, and the unknown of is this gonna feel good enough, or is this not gonna feel good enough, whatever the case. That's why we always come back, because we know and remember, our body at least remembers how good it felt in the previous times. So when you're in that moment and you're anticipating reaching for that drug, that thing, remember that feeling. Really locate what that feels like and keep that feeling with you when you have your own hypnosis. For me, when I was waning off of binging TV, eating a lot of unhealthy foods, I would start with the idea, the concept of that thing. This is the concept of the substance. This is the concept of the thing that you want to spend less time and energy on. Think about it in your mind. And when you think about that object, that thing, your subconscious is going to start filling feelings in for you. The feelings of pleasure, satisfaction, relief, all those feelings that come, as well as a tinge of guilt and shame and avoidance, of course. And we're going to think about that, and then we're going to create a deeper negative conditioning. So this means we need to really exacerbate the amount of guilt and shame, specifically fear. Fear was the number one thing that prevented me from going back to these substances. There's different ways to think about it. You can think about if you were in your ideal life, if you're your ideal person 10 years from now and you're living the life that you dream of, the lifestyle that you have, a healthy lifestyle, what does that feel like? And how do you want that to relate to your current self so that you're not living from a place of fear? You're scared that you won't be able to control the future, that you won't be able to face the problems that come up. And so you go to this thing that makes you feel really temporarily good, but ultimately really unhappy. And you need to inject more fear into the concept of this thing. Because what your problem is right now is you have more fear about everything else in your life except the substance. Like, this thing is the only thing that makes you feel good. That's why you're going for it. But in addition to the holistic solutions I provided before about like journaling, movement, meditation, etc., you need to have fear around the substance. It needs to be life or death. It needs to be literally like in deep hypnosis, once you've reached a state of deep relaxation and you think of the substance, take example, it's a cigarette. Feels so good to imagine smoking the cigarette. Now we're going to inject a little fear into it. What is fear and disgust? Ring and disgust and repulsion now. What does that feel like? What does that look like in your body? Are you curling inward? Are you producing some sense of anxiety? Now, this may be scary to do, but you can snap yourself out of it at any time. This is just a practical way to go about it. Try it for 5 minutes. Maybe even write down a hypnosis for yourself. Figure out what fear, repulsion, and absolute disgust feels and look like in your body. And think about the substance when you're in deep hypnosis. This way you are conditioning your body to actually feel horrified when you see it, when you feel it. This is not easy. Like we said in the beginning, addiction is a habitual problem. This means that in order for hypnosis to work, this needs to be a new habit that you start incorporating. It's a lifestyle change. Addiction is only a symptom of a greater problem. But the sooner that we recognize we do have the power to befriend our mental illness and overcome these mental health battles, the easier it can be to see a way out and see the light at the end of the tunnel. Eventually, it'll become easier to manage the addiction and you'll feel like there are parts of yourself that are coming back. Another thing I'm a big advocate for is expression, which I mentioned, creativity. Find some source of creative outlet for you. Writing, dancing, knitting, crocheting, journaling, woodworking, anything that will take you from this place of fear, anxiety, shame, and victimhood into something that is more empowering for you. I really hope this video helped you. Let me know what you think, and if you have any suggestions for other topics that you want to hear me talk about, please let me know in the comments down below. Love you so much. Thank you so much for supporting me and watching. Your support means the world to me. I love you. Until next time.